Hi everybody, I'm going to go through the bookwork for you guys because I've had a lot of people with questions, those of you that have done it, and I'm kind of concerned because those people have asked the questions and gotten help, but I know a lot of you guys leave it until Thursday, which is not super good for this chapter because there's a lot going on. So one of the things that a lot of people were kind of concerned about was this 3 in front. Remember you guys, addition is commutative. So if we have a plus 3 in front, this is actually going to be the same thing as if we had y equals 8 cosine 7 theta, and then a plus 3 over at the end. And then it'll look like the example I had in my video. You guys should, I hope, just be comfortable switching the order of that if you need to. So in the first problem, it does tell us do not graph. So we don't actually have to graph this one. We just need to say what is happening. So I'm just going to look at each piece and kind of work my way through. This 8 that's in front, that is like the A, right? It's in absolute value signs in the, original formula. Because remember, we have y equals absolute value of A, and then we have either sine or cosine. In the video I did sine. B, and then parentheses if we need them, if there's a horizontal shift, and then we have the plus k at the end. Okay, so the 8 corresponds to that A, which was our amplitude. So we know for this problem that the amplitude is 8. The next thing we are going to deal with is the number that is right in front of the theta. Some people, again, were concerned that there weren't parentheses. I like to point out, if we have 7x, do we say 7 and then in parentheses x? No. It's the same thing, but we don't write it like this. If we don't need parentheses, we don't have them. So that 7 deals with our period. So remember, for the period, it is 2 pi over b. And b is 7. So my period is 2 pi over 7. Thank goodness we do not have to graph this one. And then the plus 3 at the end, that is after everything else. The way you would know if it's the k or the h is if it's in parentheses, right? The 3 was at the beginning to start. It's not even connected to that theta, so it's definitely not h. It is k, and that is our vertical shift. So it is going to then go up 3. Okay, so that's problem number 1. For number 2, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to write out what the transformations would be, and then I am going to actually do them. And I'm going to try to color code again on here. So let's remember that when we have this number out front, that's the same as having a plus 1 at the end. If it makes you more comfortable to write it at the end, feel free to do that. You don't have to. But that would be the vertical shift, right? So it is going to be going up 1. That is one of the last things that we actually want to do. And I'll get to that in a second. The next thing, I have a 2 in front of my theta. Hopefully you watched the video I posted that we have to factor that out. So let me actually erase what I already have and let me work through factoring that out first and just rewriting this equation some. So we'd have 2 cosine. I need to factor out the 2. Inside the parentheses, I have theta. And then remember, when you factor out a 2, you're dividing by 2, which is the same as multiplying by a half. So we'd have minus pi over 3 times 2, which is 6. And then there is that plus 1 at the end. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to look at the period, which is the number in front of the theta. So that is 2. So my period is going to be 2 pi over 2, which is the same as just pi. So that means it's going to be shrunk in half. Because remember, normally cosine goes all the way through to 2 pi. The next thing I'm going to do is my amplitude. And the amplitude is the number being multiplied in front. So my amplitude is 2. The next thing I am going to look at is any phase shifts or vertical shifts. So my phase shift is in here. It's a minus pi over 6. That means I am going to be going right pi over 6, which is the same as 30 degrees. And then I am going to do that vertical change. I am going to go up 1. And this is pretty much the order that you're going to be wanting to do these in, just to make sure that everything stays as accurate as possible. All right. So when I'm graphing, I am going to be using a highlighter, and then I will be doing the final graph in pen, just to hopefully make it clear for you guys. Now, some people were a bit confused. They were just transforming cosine. They were changing the period, just a regular cosine. Then they were doing the amplitude, but they weren't doing it all to the same graph. So if you guys remember when we had transforming shapes, so in Math 1 and Math 2, if you remember, we had like a triangle up here. If we said it's going to go right and down and then rotate 180 degrees, what we had to do is do all 3 of those to the same shape. So it would go right, and it would be, a triangle over there. Then we'd have to shift it down, and it would be a triangle over there. And then we would do that rotating. So our final answer would be a triangle like that down in the bottom. So remember, you'd have to do all 3 things to 1, right? So that is what we are doing here, but with our sine stuff. So we have to do all 4 of these transformations. And sometimes you won't have all 4, but in this one we do. So to start off with, I'm going to draw the original, cosine function. So let's just get that down first so we kind of have our baseline. So for cosine, remember, it starts at 1, then it goes at pi over 2, it goes to 0. At pi, it was -1, 3 pi over 2 back to 0. Oh, I'm sorry, I did -2. Let me fix that real quick. Okay, -1 at pi, and then 0, and then at +1 again. So it kind of went something like that, remember? So that is what I'm going to be changing throughout this whole thing. So let's go now with the period. So the period needs to be pi instead of 2 pi. So it's going to be basically cut in half. So it's going to start at the same spot, but it's going to cross through 0 instead of pi over 2 at pi over 4. And then instead of being at -1 at pi, half of pi is pi over 2. And then you just kind of work your way through the whole thing. Hopefully you see that instead of having just 1 period, now we have 2 as we go through pi over 2. Amplitude needs to be 2, so I'm going to do that in red. So that means that instead of reaching just a height of 1, it needs to be a height of 2. And instead of a height of -1, it needs to be a height of -2, right? And that 0 is going to stay the same because 0 times 2 is still just 0. So this is kind of what that would look like. Then I am going to do the green and the yellow. And I kind of want to do them together, but I'll do them separately for you. So first I'm going to do the green, which is scooting over pi over 6. If you look at our graph, it doesn't have pi over 6 on it, but it's about 30 degrees. Our graph right now is broken into pi over 4, which is 45 degrees. So all of my points are going to shift over almost a whole amount, right? 2/3 of the way over. So this first point's going to go almost there, and I'm just going to shift everything right, almost 1 whole box, but not all the way. And this can get very messy, you guys. So just try to be careful of that. And here it goes, as best as I can through the green. If you guys have your phone or any app like this, it's really helpful to do it on that. And the next thing I am going to do it in yellow is shifting everything just up 1 box. So wherever it is, I need to go up 1. So just straight vertically up. You gotta make sure you get all of the spots. Okay. And then connecting my yellow dots. Okay, and now we've done all the transformations. So that is actually our final graph answer. So I'm going to go through it with the black just so you guys can see clearly that is the final answer. So it's going to get messy. Like I said, if you have highlighters or colored pens, that would be ideal. If you want to kind of sketch everything out, on a separate graph and then do your final answer on a full one, just make sure you upload both pieces for me. I find that it really, 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 really helps me to have this all labeled out first. Then I just kind of know what I'm doing. Again, you want to do any period or amplitude changes first. Then you want to do the phase shift and the vertical changes last. So I hope this made it a little bit clearer for you guys. You guys can check your work for bookwork. Like I said, those of you that did it got help and, persevered and did really well. Everybody else, please make sure you watch and listen to this and we'll figure it out, I guess. Okay, you guys, have a good day. See you in a bit on Zoom.